Thank you. You wanted to say something?
Yeah, what I'd like to talk about is history repeats itself. We should learn from the Jews. When a lot of Jews were extradited from here, from Leicester, they were sent back, and most of the Jews were in the camp. Now, history does repeat itself because a lot of Jews died. And it's the same with the situation when the Jews were extradited from here. You know, a lot of the Syrian people, it's not their fault that this war's arisen.
No.
It's because these terrorists are using evil and force and violence to have their say. That does not work. It has to be in a peaceful way. So they're shedding terror on their own people. So what is happening is, the people from Syria want to come here, and Europe, some have been denied access, and you've seen the rioting, the violence, I've even seen pictures where they're just fighting over a loaf of bread. You throw a loaf of bread, it's really bad. And the little children, it's not their fault. All they're trying to do, if you had a family yourselves, you would protect your family, you would get away from the terror over there, you would do exactly the same thing as what the Jews were doing to get away from evil. You know, sometimes you can't fight it, you can't help the situations you're in. It's like if you're in a job, you've got a secure job, you think, well, I've got a job for life, bang, you lose your job, you lose your mortgage on your house, you lose everything, you've got to fight back to get. And it's the same with these people, but they haven't got that. They're trying to find something. So what it is, when a nation denies access to these people, what will happen is that nation that denies access to these people, it could happen to the nation that denies them. They want access. Another nation wants access to another nation. So as you treat others, you're going to be treated the same way. That's what the Bible says. Treat others and you'll be treated in the same way. Well, that's it.
Children from this country were shipped out when this country was getting bombed. But they don't show that as any kind of
Look at the children
comparator.
during the Second World War. What did they do? They went into the underground, the London Underground. They sent the children on trains to find refuge so they could get away from the Nazi bombings from the V2s. It's a similar thing. History repeats itself, and it's repeating again.
Can I just interrupt for 1 second? In listening to what you're saying, the one thing I would comment on is that the individuals in Syria are not necessarily wanting to come here, they wanted to get away.
They do.
Right. Wanting to get away from the current situation that they're in. So it appears to me, by the way the media are portraying this, is everybody's aiming for England, everybody's aiming for Britain. That is not the case. They're needing to get out of the dire situation that they're in. England happens to be one location, or Britain happens to be one location. But actually the majority of refugees are being homed or being on the continent of Africa.
I had this conversation with Eileen today. Why don't the Muslims go to their Muslim countries? I said, actually, Eileen, the biggest intake of refugees go to Muslim countries, but you won't hear that. You'll hear about the point-something% that come here that are flooding us. That's what you'll hear about. But again, she's influenced by what is shoved down our throat and what is kept from us. You know.
Sorry, I interrupted.
And I think you're right. And you know, we just heard yesterday, didn't we? I think it was yesterday. U.S. Republican presidential candidates, Donald Trump. I think it might actually been the day before yesterday, saying that, and I think I'm literally quoting him here, that all Muslims should be barred from the United States. And I was thinking to myself, how can he, and I was watching I like watching the American progressive TV network, MSNBC, and they were saying that there was very little actual reaction in terms of from the Republican establishment. Jeb Bush and others said shouldn't be saying this, but the reaction was very muted actually. And so I thought to myself, why was the reaction muted? Why has he effectively been allowed to? I'm not saying public reaction was muted, but from the establishment it was mooted in the Republican Party in America, and I thought, why was he allowed to get away with that to a certain extent? And I think it's because the Republican establishment recognises that to a certain part of their core vote, what he said would have been hugely popular and will win him support and therefore the party support. And then the obvious question from that is, well, why is that popular with a certain section of the American electorate? And it has to be because of the way that of again the portrayal in the media of certain religions, and of the fact that there's been too much of a correlation between Daesh, who are just, I mean, kind of death cults, and the wider membership of supporters of believers in the wider Islamic tradition. And I think, I think in that sense the media has a lot to answer for, the fact that it's got to, here and in the US and elsewhere, that it has got to such a position that someone, a candidate to be leader of the free world can make such an outrageous statement, and in lots of circles it get virtually no reaction whatsoever.
Because that's what they were all thinking, and they found somebody to say it.
And indeed, that he was the only one who dared actually say it.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what they're thinking.
I think that's true, and I think that goes on to a wider point, final point for now, which is that we have here in Britain a hypocritical foreign policy. In that, we can. There was the vote last week in Parliament to start the airstrikes in Syria, and much to my sadness, 6 of my party's 8 remaining MPs voted with the government for that. I disagreed with that, and so polls showed did the majority of our party membership. They decided to vote with the government on that, and I think wrongly. And yet, where is our action I'm not saying we should take action, but where is any kind of responsibility or Foreign Office policy on what is happening, say, for example, in the Central African Republic at the moment? If we're all about the fact that there was a UN mandate for this, and no doubt there was a UN mandate for it, then when are we going to act on the decades-long UN mandate in terms of Israel? I think, a lot of our foreign policy, I mean, Robin Cook famously called, didn't he, and maybe naively, for an ethical foreign policy. And I think genuinely did try and strive for one. But, it seems to me is that it's all about Western power, and the fact that, if you take Iraq, I mean, it was American. I think I'm right in saying, Andrew, that it was American Britain that effectively armed Saddam Hussein, and then when he became a hindrance to Western hegemony and Western power, then he had to be taken out. And I think we have a system that our foreign policy is not consistent. We claim to be nations that believe in human rights and believe in supporting people and the freedom of the individual. But if you look at our foreign policy, it's littered with cases where we've not shown that in our actions as a government. I don't quite know what we do about that, Andrew, do you?
That's been happening since the dawn of time, where countries like ours ensure. Margaret Thatcher's son was caught trying to get rid of somebody. It's always been the way. They put in who they want to put in so that the resources are steadily flowing in. Right. It's always happened. This is nothing new.
That was the question I was going to ask. Why do you think that is? But you're beginning to answer it.